Time to talk about more PowerShell. So I looked at why I couldn't get the one demo to work. I still haven't figured out why it didn't work on the virtual machine like it should have, but it does work just fine on my physical machine. So what we're going to do is, as you can see here, I was playing around with it. If I do my show bits or get service bits, my bit service is stopped. But if I get my service bits and the start method, it'll go ahead and start my service for me, just like it's supposed to. Now I can actually stop the service, and it works flawlessly like it's supposed to. So as of right now, that may have been just a VM thing on the VM that I'm using. Still not 100% sure why it didn't work and why I was getting those errors, but something I'll look at later. Because it worked great on my physical machine and it worked great on the Linux machine. So there's no reason it should not have worked on the Windows machine. But regardless, we're moving on. But we're going to start talking about some variables. Variables are huge. If you've never done any type of scripting or programming or anything, variables are, you're going to use them consistently. If you're used to scripting and development and stuff, you know what I'm talking about, right? Variables are just huge. You use them for everything. But we're going to talk about how we use variables in PowerShell. And for those of you who are not aware, variables are a place you're going to store information. So instead of saying, hey, go to my C:\Windows system32 directory, you're going to use a variable called $env : I forget the actual OS. I think it's OS on a Mac. I forget what it is on Windows. We could do $env : hostname, which will be the host name of the machine you're working on. So instead of typing out, I think mine is like desktop dash a bunch of random letters and numbers, we're going to use env : same with username, env : hostname. It's a place to store information. So they usually contain letters, numbers, and underscores. However, PowerShell can contain spaces, but you have to put it in quotes. And I started tinkering with it again the other day. I got it to work once, several months ago, but I tried to tinker with it the other day and I was just like, I didn't like it, because if you're going to put a space, you got to use quotes. By the time you do all that, tab completion doesn't work. It's bad practice. It can be done, but it's bad practice. Don't put a space in your variable name. Use an underscore, a dash, letters, numbers, something. Don't use spaces. And then, so this is a pet peeve of mine. If you're going to use a variable, try and make it a sensible variable name. So if you're, you'll see in some of my scripts here in a minute where I'm trying to get the user's first name. So I may use a variable called $fname for first name, $L for $L name for last name, or I might just go ahead and spell it out. There's no right or wrong way of doing it. It's just a personal preference. But if somebody else is going to read your code, make sure they can understand what you're typing. I know I have a hard time reading bash scripts because they tend to use a single letter. Command prompt, when in their for loop, they use an I. So for I in whatever, I never understood what I was. So it was always hard for me to read those and understand what was going on. But in PowerShell, you can make your variables sensible, give them a name. And it doesn't matter how long it is because we have tab completion. So you can type in the first few letters, hit tab, and the variable name should just auto-populate once it's in there. So we're going to play around with this here in a second. But when you're using variables inside quotes, meaning you're doing something where you're writing something to the screen for the user. If you use single quotes around your statement, the variables will not expand. Meaning, well, you know what? Let's just go right into it. It's easier to explain. So let's go ahead and close out of this one. We're not saving it. Variables. Here we go. So we're going to create a variable. All the variables are created with a $sign and then the name of it. And we're going to do it equals. And basically, we're going to assign 5 to the variable, right? So we're going to go ahead and run this line right here. So now if I do $var, the variable is 5. Looks like there's a space 5. Yeah, that's interesting. Hang on. That's interesting. It's putting in an additional return before the 5. I don't know why. But so now we have a variable, and I know it's not sensible, but this is not going in a script for anyone to read. I could have typed out the whole word variable, but I just got lazy and put var. But now I'm going to create a string, and I'm going to put it in single quotes. So when I do this, let me just show you. So we're going to execute that. It didn't do single quotes. Oh, this is starting to get irritating. All right, so I put it in single quotes. Now if I do $string, right, the variable did not expand, meaning we did not see what was inside that variable. So if you're writing verbose messages to yourself when building your tool and you want to do something that where you don't want the variable to expand, but you want to see what the variable name is, you could do something like this, put it in single quotes. Whereas if we do string 2, you know what? Give me just a second here. I'm going to just restart this. See if that makes a difference. All right. String 2. So client undefined. Okay. See if we're back up and running. Okay. Simple reboot. So now it didn't do anything. This is interesting. All right, so let's do this. Yeah, for some reason it's not carrying over the single quotes for whatever reason. So, but what's supposed to happen is it's supposed to expand whatever's in. Oh, you know what? It's because I didn't redeclare my what's in var. So now if I do string 2, it still didn't expand. Oh, yeah. Okay, let me redeclare that. Now let me throw an error. All right. So $sign var equals 5. $sign string 2 equals now if I do $sign string 2, it should expand. This is what's supposed to happen. It takes whatever's in the variable and expands it. What is in there? So now we have a backtick. So if you wanted to do something like you wanted to say the variable var contains and then display whatever is in the variable, well, you would put it in double quotes so that this variable will expand, but you use a backtick to make sure this one does not expand. And let's see if I can get this one to copy over. All right, so it did take the quotes this time. If I hit enter, now if I do a $sign string 3, the variable var contains 5. Excuse me. So that's how you deal with variables, whether you need to use, that's how you determine whether you need to use double quotes or single quotes around your variables. If they're going to be in a string, if you want them to expand, use double quotes. If you don't want them to expand, you don't care to see what's inside, you can use single quotes. If you're going to have one that does and one that doesn't, make sure you add your backtick. Basically is what that does. So what can we do with this? Well, we can do something like this. If we could do something like this. So we can get the date, which has a property of day of week, right? And then we're going to finish out the statement is how you execute within a command within quotes. So basically what I'm doing here is with the $sign, I'm saying execute this command and grab and store it in as a variable. And I also want you to grab the day of the week property of that and store it in a variable. And then we're using double quotes, so we're going to expand what's in there and say this is how you execute a command within quotes. So copy. Copy. Let me pull this over. So again, my end quotes. So I'm going to grab the date, but I want to grab the day of the week And then I'm just going to write this out as string. So the whole thing will end up being a string. If I hit enter. So Monday, I don't know if you can see it. Monday is how you execute a command within quotes. So normally if I do get date, that's all the information I normally get is the whole thing. But I only wanted this.
So what's the name?
Oh, say again.
What's the name of the variable that's storing the Monday then?
So it's not, we're not assigning a variable, essentially. I guess we're really putting it into memory and then calling it all at the same time. Does that make sense? Because we cannot go back. We can't go back and access this unless we declare a variable. Does that make sense?
Okay, yeah, I get it. You're just temporarily storing it in memory.
Right. Exactly. Now, if we were going to come back and use this multiple times, I would probably do something like this: dollar today equals, and then I could copy this out, right? And close that. And hit enter. Now, if I do today, so it gives me Monday. So this method would probably be good if you're building a some sort of tool that is going to do different things on different days or something like that. It's going to do one thing based on it being Monday and a different thing based on it being Tuesday, right? Of course, like I was getting to, we also have the day of the week property, the day of the year. So maybe you have a script that runs on New Year's Day every year. You could actually use the same technique to do that. All right. So now we're going to start talking about we're going to talk about lists, for lack of a better term. I know different languages call them different things. We're going to refer to them as a list. Oh, this is going to be all right. So we're going to build object one. It's just going to be a list of 3 different items, space separated. When we do this, it just creates a single item. So if I do $1, and it puts it all on the same line. So if I do, if I try to grab this thing by its index, I should be able to grab it by 0. It doesn't even have an index. It's just a single thing. Now, if I do the same thing, if I do object 2 and then separate them by commas, or no, single quotes. I think I would want to do that. Create object 2. Oh, it has to be comma separating. And here it's okay to have spaces. So now if I do $2, it's 3 separate items and they're all on separate lines. So now I should be able to grab things based on their index. There's object 1. If I do 3, I should get an error or nothing. 2 will give me object 3. So that's how you deal with the lists. Go like this. Right. So let's say we have our original object 1 up here. We're going to create this object list, but we wanted everything to be, we wanted one object, but we want it all on separate lines. You can do the backtick in. The backtick in is the PowerShell way, or maybe the Microsoft way, not 100% sure, of doing your new line. And what I mean by that is this is how you put everything on a separate line. If I preface it with a backtick new line, backtick in, that'll put object 2 underneath object 1, and object 3 will go under object 2, which is under object 1. And here's what I mean. Now if I do list, whereas whenever I did the object 1, it's all on 1. So that's how you could take object 1 and put all of its items on a new line, even though it's one single object. So we're going to create this variable, because now you see me mess with the index where I put a number inside of a square bracket. That's an index. Basically meaning every item that's in this list is either in slot 1, slot 2, slot 3. You access slot 1 with the number 0, because everything starts with 0. And so we're going to start playing with that. All right, so now if I do my list variables, now I have my 4 objects in my list. If I do, I don't want to do that. So if I do 0, that's going to give me object 1, the first object. Just does not want to cooperate with me today. All right, so if I do a -1, just like in most languages, that's going to give me my last item that's in the list, which is object 4. However, if I do -2, that's going to give me the second to last object. Now, if I wanted a range of objects, I would do, let's grab the second object through the second to last. How about that? That's going to give me objects. That's odd that it gives me object 1. So let's do 3, 2, 2 and 3. Maybe I need a 5th object in there to do it right. Anyway, so these all have properties and methods as well. So these methods are things we can do to it. We can do toUpper. So if we were trying to turn all the case to uppercase, this is how we would do it. It has a toLower trim. You can trim out the white space. You can trim just the beginning, so many characters out of the beginning, things like that. Send it to bytes. You can pad it left, pad it right, all kinds of different things. So you could also measure it. If we wanted to see how long it was, how many items are in the list, we would use the length method. And there's 4 items in my list. That means I can do, if I just grab all the items, I could do here, do 0 to 3, because I know there's 4 items in my list. I can do 0 to 3. That'll get me. Oh, wrong. That'll give me all 4 items. To upper, it'll take all my objects, make them uppercase. To lower, make some lowercase. Let's see. Oh, we also have a replace. So what we could do is we can replace anything that says object 3 with object 5. So we wanted to replace something in the list. So now we have 1, 2, 5, 4. So that's how we would mess with our lists. All right. So if you've ever messed with Windows in the past, we always had these environmental variables that were percent, computer name, percent. All the environmental variables are surrounded by percents. Bash, I believe they begin with a $sign and they're all in uppercase. So I know I have to do echo shell to see what shell I'm in and things like that. Well, in PowerShell, they all begin with $env. And we can do git command here's all the different commandlets we can do with variables. So we have a commandlet that is get variable. So if we copy that one and we get variable here, so these are all the environmental variables on a Windows machine. To include, so true. This is going to come in handy, and it's only available in PowerShell 7. It's the ternary operator. Hopefully we'll get time to talk about that. That's something that came to PowerShell that I've fallen in love with. But we have home for our home drive. Remember I was talking about users. PWD is your present working directory. Today, you could do $env. Today is Monday. What was the users? So these are kind of new. Is Linux, is Mac. I can't remember exactly what version those came out in. I want to say they came out with the ternary operator, so in PowerShell 7. It's great because a lot of the way you write these commands are based on your operating system. So you could do a test. Is this Linux, is this OS, without having to write your own test for it to see if it's going to run. All right, so if we do this on Linux, we can do get tech variable. Here's all the Linux ones. You'll see a lot of them are the same, except home. So it also has the is Linux, is Mac, is Windows, right? So home, no, OS. There's one of them that is slightly different, which threw me off one day. Is it I do that and hit. All right. So all I did was I typed in $env and I hit tab to get all my lists to come up. So I have host name, right? It doesn't have it anymore. It used to have an OS environmental variable. I think it was in 7, maybe not 7.1. So I'm running 7.1. In 7, it had a $OS. But then, oh no, it was the temp directory. That's what it was. It doesn't even have temp anymore. But the point I'm getting to is Windows had a $env colon TMP, whereas Mac had a $env colon TEMP. And so I was trying to write a tool that was cross-platform, and that was actually throwing me off. So you kind of got to watch how these variables are. They may be slightly different. And then whenever I did the research on it, it was actually just calling the actual variable that was underneath PowerShell. So where I would have done $TMP on my Mac machine, that's basically all it was doing, is it was calling that function. So what else we got left to talk about? All right. Oh, so we can run a command and then put the output into a variable. Copy. And so when we do that, once we do that, once we put the output of a command into a variable, we can always go back to that output. So back whenever I said a variable is a place to store things, this is what I was talking about. We ran a command, we got this output. Well, now that we have the output, we can always come back and use it. That means we've also got its different properties and methods and other things we can do with it. So now we can start to act upon this. And then to go back to the gentleman's earlier question about when we were using this, this is an example that I had created. So if I were to run this one, copy. All right, so today is get date because I use single quotes. I could also do, I use double quotes. If I were to use single quotes, and then $ today. Oh, I have to. There we go. Now if I do, today is, there we go. I finally got it to work. So basically what I ended up having to do, I have it written wrong in my demo. But first of all, in order to get a variable to expand, I have to put it in double quotes. And then also to run a command within a string, you have to put it in parentheses preceded by a $ that says this is a command, you got to run it. So that's where we got this command with that method And so if we run this one, copy, bam. Let me pull this over so you can see it. So it should come out today is Monday, and I'm going to get the date. Should say the 30th. So basically I'm only grabbing, I'll show. All right, today is Monday the 30th. All I did is out of this command, I only wanted Monday and the 30th. And that's how I pulled it out. So now, whenever to fill your variables, you may want to prompt the user for the information. So I had an example of where I was, let's see, do I got the example? No, not yet. So there's an example where I was creating a new user script and the I would have to prompt the user for the username and other things. So I would use a command called read host, and read host will prompt whoever's running the tool for the information, and then I stored it in a fname variable or some other variable. But here we are going to use a number. Right? So if I read a host, it's going to have me enter a number. And I also want to point out the fact that in my command, I put in a colon, but read host will automatically add a colon for you. So that's why I have this double colon here. So if I add in the number 5, I hit enter. Now, if I do 5 plus 6. Oh, no. That's not what I want to do. Dollar number plus 6. I got 56. The reason is anytime you have PowerShell read in something, it reads it in as a string. So if I were to do dollar number, you can see that my number is a string. So it's a string 5. It's not an integer or anything like that. So in order for that to actually work, I'd have to preface my variable with what type of variable I want. Int. And then my variable name, I'm going to read in a number. I'm going to read in 5. So now if I do number plus 6, I'll get 11. And that is because my new member type is or my new object is a 32-bit integer. All right, what else I got left? All right, so that's it for the demos on variables. I do have more things to talk about. So we talked about declaring a variable. What we didn't talk about was this $_dot. So when you're sending things across the pipeline, you might not know what name it is, but you know, and you may only want like the member type or the property that's associated with it. And that's what you'll do here. So what this $_dot means, whatever's coming over the pipeline, grab whatever, the property. And then we talked about the sub expressions. That's where I was using the get dates and get day of month and things like that. So I think I have an example of it's part of the pipeline demo. That's fine. So let's see, do I have it? All right, we'll see an example of the $_ whenever we start talking about the loops. But for now, we're going to move on to the different variable types there are. So you have single, which is a 32-bit integer. Or no, the ints are 32-bit assigned to integers. The singles are 32-bit. You have strings, you have characters, you have bytes. You have booleans, which are your true false. You use a lot of these for testing. You have decimals. You actually have a date time. You have arrays. Hash tables are pretty cool because you can use a hash table to build an object. So what I mean by that is, as you're reading in various things, you can take bits and pieces of those properties of those objects that are coming in and assign it to a different object within a hash table, or you can assign it to a hash table, which is actually building out a whole different property or a whole different object for you. I think I've got a couple examples of this that I'll show later. Some of the variable commands that are out there are these. You can, a new variable, you can declare a variable, set variables, remove variables, get variables. You can actually clear out your variables. Oh, that's the one, get child item env. Let me see if that's what I was looking for. Get item $env, which is your environmental PS drive, your provider. Nope, it's not there either. So it must have been in PowerShell 7, not 7, and they must have taken it out for 7.1. But those are the different commands that you're going to use. I don't use any of those. I just declare my variables and keep going. But those are there if you need them. And we're not taking a break just yet. The pipeline. So there's a lot to talk about the pipeline. I don't think we're going to get into the pipeline as deep as I would like. We're starting to run behind on time. But just know that the output of one commandlet can input your next commandlet. So when I was showing the get tax service, start service, that's kind of the pipeline. So you can, so I'm going to get the service. When I was getting the service bits, it was sending that, only that service across the pipeline, and then it was going to stop the service, basically. But you can also use the pipeline to export things. You've seen me export to a HTML. You can actually export to JSON, CSV. Grid view is kind of cool. It only works in Windows. It does not work in Linux or Mac just yet. I don't know if it ever will, but they did take it away for a while. So depending on the version of PowerShell on Windows you're using, you're going to have out grid view. And what I mean is Windows PowerShell, which is only on Windows, will have it. So PowerShell 5.1 and lower will have it. PowerShell 6 does not have it. PowerShell 7, I don't think has it. PowerShell 7.1 does have it. So they took it away for a little bit. And here's what Outgrid View does for us. So let's say I wanted to get all those processes again, right? Get tech. I have all these processes. So there's not, we're going to talk about it here in a little bit, but there's not all the information is displayed here. So what I used to do in the past was I would get process and then I would export that to CSV so I could open up Excel and look at everything. However, I have to remember to go back and delete all those CSV files that I created, and it got cumbersome. But now if I do get process, type that to out grid view, give it a second, it opens up this GUI. So now I can kind of see what my output is going to be before I send it to a CSV file. But not only that, is it gives me a chance to start filtering on things. So I can say my process name, I can change it from contains to starts with CO, or how about this? We're all worried about the SVC host, right? So all my process, I only want to see the processes that start with SVC. So that's what this does. So now I know what that output looks like. I can build a command that'll look like that, send it out to a CSV or something like that. It's an easier way to start dealing with your output, in my opinion. You can use it for other things as well. So convert to HTML. We've seen that. So out file or out printer. So out file, you could actually send it to any extension that is ASCII, I believe. So .txt, .doc, anything like that. Out printer, that'll send your output to your default installed printer. I've not played with it because I've never really had a need to send anything to the printer. So I always send it to a CSV and do something else with it, or send it to a JSON, something like that. You could also export to XML if you have a tool that can import XML to do something with it. So here's where we would actually get real deep into what actually happens to the pipeline. But the main takeaway from this slide right here is that you have two things that can go across the pipeline. Your outputs, they can either be by value, meaning the value of whatever the output is matches the value of an input on the other side of the pipeline. You can only have one in order for it to work. If it doesn't have any values that match, then it'll go by property name. So what I mean by property name is some of the services we've seen have a dot name property. So if your first command will actually have a property that is outputting the property name property, your next command has to have something that accepts pipeline input by property name. If that makes any sense. I know it's a little hard to. So let me see if I can do this real quick. So I'm gonna do full. So the first thing we need to look for is to make sure that our parameters, right, if they accept pipeline input, right, or how about So our our command on the right hand side of the pipeline needs to be able to accept pipeline input. And so we kind of look through here to see what properties or what can be accepted by pipeline input. So here's a property, or here's that can accept pipeline input. And it can be by property name or by value. So what this means is whatever commandlet I have on the left side of the pipeline needs to be able to send over something, either the property name of name or a value that looks similar to what is going to be a string name. Hopefully that clears it up a little bit anyway. It's a real deep subject, and I just don't think we have time to fully explore it. But just know that whatever is output on the left-hand side needs to be able to be inputted on the right-hand side of the pipeline. Otherwise, you'll get some weird, funky errors. Logic and flow control. So in order to look at some stuff later, we're going to kind of skim over this. I'll show you some examples. I'm not going to do any demos. But for your logic and flow control, you have your if-else statement. So if this test is true, do this. If the test is false, do that. If you've ever done any type of scripting or development, you're pretty familiar with it. We also have a switch parameter. So instead of doing a ton of nested if statements, if this, or if this, or if this, or if this, we can do, here's the test, here's the values that it could be. If it matches any of these, do this. And I've got an example of one I just wrote recently that I'll show you. And then we have our ForEach and our fors. I'll just show the examples. So we're not doing that. We're going to do the logic demo. So instead of actually doing these demos, I'm going to show this new AD user tool that I had built. It was built many, many years ago, back in 2016. So a lot of the stuff in here is old. I've not updated it. And this is actually whenever I was first starting to learn PowerShell. So you'll see a lot of undocumented things that I put in here. Let's see. All right. So it is 12 o'clock. How about before I dig into this, we go ahead and break for lunch. Let's see, 12.